Hello there, I'm Thundaga and welcome to my How to Make a Pokemon Game tutorial series. This series will cover all of the essential info that you need to make a Pokemon game in RPG Maker and Pokemon Essentials. In this episode, we'll be talking about choosing starter Pokemon. First, we'll break down the event for a starter Pokemon Pokeball, where you can choose if you want to pick that Pokemon or not. While we talk about that, we'll also discuss the flow of events for before and after picking a starter Pokemon, since there will be plenty of switches that we turn on and off in this process. After that, we'll briefly touch on how to make our starter choice impact our rival's Pokemon team by using the starter choice variable. Next, we'll also cover how to give a Pokedex to the player, since the professor usually does that as well. And finally, we'll get a little crazy with it and cover a few ways to randomize our starter Pokemon selection. With all that said, let's get into it. So, as you can see, I've made a lab right here in the bottom right corner of Test Town. And if we go inside, we can see that our lab looks like this. We've got our Professor Oak event here and a little table right next to him that can fit 3 starter Pokemon Pokeballs. There are no Pokeballs on the table right now, so let's fix that. Let's go to the Pokemon Lab map from base Pokemon Essentials and take a look at how these Pokeball events are set up. What I'll do is I'll take the one here on the left and copy it with Control-C, and then I'll go back to our lab and then paste it so we can get a better look here in our lab. Let's double click it and look inside and break down how this event is set up. The Pokeball has 3 event pages that correspond to the different states of the game, before, during, and after we've chosen a starter. The first page here is the default state, where when you talk to it, it just says it's a ball. The second page here is the most important one, since this is where the magic happens. If the global switch choosing starter is on, then when we interact with the ball, we get the choice to choose the starter. If we say yes, then the first thing that will happen is we will call PBAddPokemon. Inside of PBAddPokemon here, we can see that it's a Bulbasaur at level 5. If we wanted to change this to say a Turtwig at level 10, then this is really easy to do. We can just right click and edit, then type in Turtwig and then change this level here to level 10. After we get the Pokemon, what happens next is it sets choosing starter to off, and then it sets our starter choice variable to 1. Setting the starter choice here is super important if we want things in the game to change based on our starter choice. In base essentials, Bulbasaur is starter choice 1, Charmander is starter choice 2, and Squirtle is starter choice 3. If you wanted to, you could always make more, like having a Pikachu be starter choice 4, but that's up to you. The last thing the event does is it sets self-switch A to on, which will then make the third event page active where the ball has disappeared. This is because we picked the ball up. So with this current event structure, if we pick one starter, then the other starter Pokeballs will not be interactable because we turn choosing starter to off. So then they'll all go back to event page 1 here. So how should we turn the choosing starter switch to on in the first place? What I would recommend is making an event that the player steps on that turns choosing starter on. We can have this be a tile on the floor here, and when we step on it, Professor Oak talks to us and tells us to come and pick a starter. So let's set that up real quick. What I've done here is really quickly whipped up an event where when we step on this tile, we'll walk up 2 tiles, and then the professor will play an exclaim animation, and then they'll say, "Welcome to my lab, pick a starter Pokemon," and then it will set choosing starter to on. Now on the second page, let's make a new event page where if choosing starter is on and we step on this, Professor Oak says, "Wait, don't leave." That can look something like this. So that way when the player steps on this tile and choosing starter is on, then Professor Oak will say, "Wait, you haven't picked a starter yet." Then the player will turn down and take 1 step backwards. That way they go back up here to the area for the starter selection. And finally, on a third page, we can make it so that way if our starter choice is 1 or above, then that means we've picked a starter Pokemon, and we can make this event page do nothing. This way we can walk over the event and leave after our starter has been chosen. Now for a pro tip, you can make this one event cover multiple tiles. So this narrow walkway here, that's 3 tiles wide, can all be covered by one event. The trick is in the event's name in the top left corner up here. If you name the event size, and then in parentheses, XY, this will extend the event to the right and give it a width of X, and extend the event up and give it a height of Y. So for example, if we make this size 3,1, the event will extend to the right a couple tiles and have a width of 3, and it will extend up, well, it won't extend up at all because it just has a height of 1. As a couple visual examples, here's what 3,1 looks like, and then here's what 3,2 would look like, and then finally here's what 3,3 would look like. This makes the event cover all of these tiles, so if we have a trigger of player touch, then it will trigger on any of these tiles. Let's set this back to 3-1 though. Using event size is super useful for reducing clutter and minimizing how many events you need. It would really stink if we had to copy and paste this event a couple times to fill the gap here. Speaking of copying and pasting events, let's make a couple more starter Pokemon balls. We do have a level 10 Turtwig in this first ball here, so let's just copy this over and paste it and make a fire starter Pokemon ball. Let's go into this event and let's name it Fireball. Then let's go to the second page here, and instead of getting us a Turtwig, let's choose a fire starter. How about something like Torchic? I like Torchic. Let's hit OK on this, and then let's also be sure to set the starter choice now to 2. After that, I think that's all the changes we need to make. Actually, one more thing, let's go and update the text up here. So instead of saying, do you want Turtwig the grass Pokemon? It says, do you want Torchic the fire Pokemon? There we go, perfect. I think this event is looking good. Let's copy and paste this one more time and start making our water starter ball. We'll name it Water Ball, and then on the second page, let's choose another water starter. How about something like Totodile? I do like Totodile as a starter. Then let's go in and make the starter choice 3, because this is our third starter. And lastly, let's update this text so it says, do you want Totodile, the water Pokemon? Perfect, there we go. All 3 starter Pokemon balls are all set up. There is one more thing I'd like to do though before we test this out in-game. This is mostly for personal preference, but I always like to see a picture of the starter Pokemon that we're choosing before we actually hit yes and lock in our choice. We can do this by using a text command that we covered in an earlier tutorial to show pictures. That command is /f, followed by our sprite's name in brackets. So at the start here for Turtwig, we could do /f and then type in all caps Turtwig, because I know there is a Turtwig sprite. We can do the same for Torchic here, and instead of typing Turtwig, let's type /f followed by Torchic in brackets. And the same for Totodile, it'd be /f Totodile, and there we go. The last thing that we need to do is make sure that these images exist in our game's pictures folder. What you can do is go into the Pokemon folder and then search front, and then start looking for all the Pokemon sprites. So Torchic right here. We can copy and paste these into the pictures folder. I've already done that, so here in graphics pictures, we can see there are Torchic, Totodile, and Turtwig. And oh my goodness, I'm realizing that I picked starters that all just start with the letter T. What are the odds? Oh, and my YouTube channel starts with T too. Oh, anyway, let's move on and test this out in-game now. Alright, here we are in game. If we walk up, we can see Professor Oak, and then we'll automatically walk up and the cutscene will start that we set up. The very short cutscene where he says, "Welcome to my lab, pick a starter Pokemon." You know what? I don't feel like picking a starter Pokemon. I'm going to leave. Wait, you haven't picked a starter yet. Oh darn, well what if we go over here? Ah, see look, our event width is working properly. Okay, well let's try choosing one. We could choose Turtwig, the grass Pokemon, and look, there's the picture that we put in our pictures folder. We could choose Torchic, the fire Pokemon, or we could choose Totodile, the water Pokemon. Sure, let's choose Totodile, the water Pokemon. Yay, we obtained a Totodile. Nice, we got ourselves a cool water starter. I don't want to give it a nickname just yet. So now, choosing starter should be off. So we cannot interact with and pick any of the other starter Pokemon balls. And if we try to leave, now we will be able to leave because the starter choice variable has been set. If we go into the debug menu, field options, variables, and we look down here at variable 7, we can see our starter choice is set to 3. Nice. So now that we've got this variable set and we've got a starter Pokemon, we can start doing some cool things with it, such as making our rival use a different Pokemon team based on our starter choice. The way that we would do that is with trainer forms, where we fight a different version of our rival based on the value of the starter variable. I covered this in a previous tutorial, but as a refresher, inside of a trainer battle event, when we call trainerbattle.start, we can pass in a number value for the trainer form. If we don't pass in anything, then the default form will be used, which is form 0. As you can see here, I have a battle event against a trainer of type Rival 1, and their name is Blue, but if we go in and edit, what we can do after the name, we can do comma, and then type pb get, and then in parentheses, let's type in the number 7 here. What pbget does is it gets the value of a variable, and in this case, variable 7, which is our starter selection. Inside of the trainers.txt pbs file, I've gone ahead and defined forms for Blue 1, 2, and 3 here. Up above there's also this form 0 just in case. You can tell the trainer's form number based on the number next to their name here in the brackets. So, rival 1, blue, comma 1, and then 2 and 3, and so on and so forth. Form 1 blue has a level 10 Torchic to counter our Turtwig choice. Form 2 blue has a level 10 Totodile to counter our Torchic, and lastly, Form 3 blue has a Turtwig to counter our Totodile. Since we just picked Totodile, and our starter choice variable is set to 3, when we fight blue here, we'll be fighting against Form 3, since we plugged in pbget7, so it's getting the form for our starter choice. And look, we're going against a Turtwig, that's Form 3 blue. If we go into the debug and go into variables and find our variable 7 here for starter choice, if we change this down to 1, what we can do then is instead fight against Form 1 blue. Let's see how this goes. If it all works according to plan, what we should do is fight against a Torchic here now. There we go, awesome. I feel a little bit more confident with my Totodile into Torchic. We'll see if this is a better matchup for us. If we wanted to set up some later versions of a blue battle, we could make forms 4, 5, and 6, and then in the event just use pbget 7 and then plus 3. This way it would be 1 plus 3, 2 plus 3, or 3 plus 3 for forms 4, 5, and 6. We can do so many other things with this variable too. For example, we could have an item ball on the ground and there could be some conditional branches inside. If our starter choice is equal to 1, then we picked a grass starter, so it could give us the miracle seed to boost our grass type attacks. If starter choice is 2, then it could give us the charcoal. Else, starter choice must be 3 then, so give the player a mystic water for their water starter. And that's about it for the starter choice variable. Hopefully this helps you come up with some other cool ideas that you could use this variable for. Next, let's look at how to get a Pokedex. If we go into the Base Essentials lab map, we can see that there's a Pokedex event here, and this grants us the Pokedex. It does a check at the top to see if we already have one or not. If we don't have one, then it gives us a Pokedex, and if we do already have one, then it just says, hey, you already have a Pokedex. As a little programming tip for those who don't already know, the exclamation mark here at the front of the conditional check means not. So if the player does not have a Pokedex. Anyway, let's just go ahead and copy this Pokedex event, and then take it back into our lab and paste it, and then we can begin modifying it for our own purposes. The most important command inside of here is the player.hasPokedex equals true. What this will do is it will give us a Pokedex. But that's not all we need to do. If we just do this, and then we play our game and we try to access the Pokedex, we can see that the option to open the Pokedex is still not available. What we need to do is also make sure to unlock a region for our Pokedex. A lot of this is covered by the assistant here in the Base Essentials lab, but essentially what you need to do is make sure to run the player.pokedexunlock command with a number based on the region you wish to unlock. For example, if you run player.pokedexunlock 0, that will unlock Kanto, which is the region at index 0. And not only can you unlock them, at any time, if you want, you can also choose to lock them by calling player.pokedex.lock0, so that way the access to the Kanto Dex will be prevented. Inside of the debug menu, if you go to player options and then go down into toggle Pokedex and regional dexes, you can give yourself a Pokedex yes or no, and also toggle the individual regions on or off. So that's pretty neat. You could also turn national on or off if you want. This is pretty useful for testing if you're ever locking or unlocking different regional Pokedexes. We can see the Pokemon inside of these in the Regional Dexes PBS file. As we scroll through this PBS file, we could see Dex 0 here, and it has all the Pokemon defined inside for Dex 0, and then Dex 1, which in this case happens to be the Johto Pokedex. The names and indices for each of these are also defined inside of the settings script at around line 232 here. We can see that the Kanto Pokedex is index 0, and the Johto Pokedex is index 1, and underneath this is the National Pokedex, which actually plays by a different set of rules. Since we've got starters from other regions available in our game, let's just give ourselves the National Dex for now. The way that you would unlock the National Dex is by calling player.pokedexunlock -1. Since the National Dex is special and isn't beholden to any region, it doesn't use a region index here and instead uses -1. So let's go ahead and copy this and put it in our Pokedex event in our lab, so that way when we get ourselves the Pokedex, we will also have the National Dex and we'll be able to just see everything. Anyway, that's about it for Pokedexes. How about now we end on something fun? Let's talk about making our starters randomized. There's a few different ways that we could choose to do this. Method 1 would be that we set a variable when we interact with the ball to a random number in a range. So for example, I have a new variable here, and what we would do is we would set it to a random between, let's say, like 1 and 3, for example. Then we could set up some conditional branches, so if that random variable is set to 1, then we get Pokemon 1, and if it's set to 2, we get Pokemon 2, and if it's set to 3, Pokemon 3, so on and so forth. I personally dislike this method though, so let's talk about method 2. The way method 2 works is instead we could set 3 variables to a random value earlier in the game, one for each starter, and have that variable determine which is randomly chosen. A good place for this would be in the Professor Oak intro dialogue when we enter the lab. And here's how that would look in the event. It would be random starter 1 is set to a random value between 1 and 3, or however many we want to choose from, and then random starter 2 and random starter 3 are all 3 set to a random value here. If we do it this way, then players won't be able to save and load and re-roll their starters every single time that they interact with the Pokeball. Another way that we could do this is with method 3. Since we're talking about setting a variable value and having that determine our starter, we could also have a sort of personality quiz at the start of the game where you could ask the player questions and set a variable based on their answers. This is mostly just food for thought, since I think it would be interesting if more games used a sort of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon style starter system. If we were to do something like this, it could be as basic as we have a show choice event and we ask them a question about their Pokemon preferences, and then we set a variable based on their answer. Then what we could do is make a Pokeball event where their answer influences a variable, and then that variable gives them a corresponding Pokemon inside. But yeah, this is mostly just food for thought here. Method 4, though, is the final method, and this is more elegant and something I created myself. This uses a script that I wrote years ago and I recently updated for Pokemon Essentials version 21. This will select a random Pokemon from a predefined list. The link to download this full script will be in the video description. What I did here was I went and I took this script and I pasted it below all the other debug functions, but above the compiler, right here. At the top of this script here is a command that grants a random Pokemon from an array, called pb_grant_random_Pokemon. We can specify the array of Pokemon that we want to choose from, as well as the level of the Pokemon we want to grant. There's another method underneath that just returns a random Pokemon from an array with no level specified, just in case you ever want to pick a random Pokemon for anything else. Underneath these methods, there are a few pre-made arrays. There's random grass, random fire, and random water, and also underneath that is random legends, which is something that I just added for fun. It's very easy to copy these and make a new array. So for example, if we copy random water here and go underneath the random legends, we could make one for random electric, and inside this could have, say, Pikachu and Plusle, and then Minun, and heck, even Pachirisu. Hopefully I spelled that right. And yeah, like that's very easy there to now have an array of some random electric Pokemon to choose from. To use the method from this script for a random starter, what we can do is go into our starter Pokeball, and instead of calling pb_add_Pokemon, we can call pb_grant_random_Pokemon. Let's set some parentheses, and then inside we'll type random_grass for the grass starter, and then let's just make it level 5. Since we're doing a random starter here, let's also make it so that way it doesn't show the picture of Turtwig anymore, since now we don't know what we're gonna get. We're gonna get a random starter. And let's actually just change this dialogue too. So he'll just say, do you want a grass Pokemon? Yes or no? Okay, so now we will get a random grass starter here. Let's see how that looks in game. All right, I've started a new save, and now I'm in the lab and I'm ready to choose a starter. Let's choose the grass starter and see if we can get a randomized starter from our array. Do you want a grass Pokemon? I say yes. Oh, we did get a Turtwig. That is awesome. Oh my gosh, what are the odds? You know, I'm actually gonna reset and see if I can get anything else. All right, I've resetted. Let's see what else we can get. Do you want grass Pokemon? Yes. A Turtwig again? Oh my gosh. I'm gonna hit F12 and I'm gonna keep resetting until I can get something else new. Come on, baby. Come on. Bulbasaur. Okay, that's pretty cool. Let's F12 again. What else can we get here? Grass Chikorita. There we go. It is randomly picking them from the pool here. Our odds so far do seem pretty Turtwig favored, but yeah, see, we're getting some Bulbasaurs and so on. It's pretty cool to be able to randomize starters in this way, and thankfully it is very easy in data, in the script there, to define other randomized arrays if you ever want to choose from them that way. So yeah, this is pretty cool. And once again, the download link for the script that I created is in the description. And that does it for this tutorial on choosing starter Pokemon. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something from this tutorial, please remember to like and subscribe. To access my tutorial website, please check the link in the video description. As a reminder, this tutorial video was for Pokemon Essentials version 21.1, so in the future it's very possible that the layout of some things could be changed. In general though, this series should get you where you need to go when it comes to making your own Pokemon fan game. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a good one. Best of luck to you in your Pokemon fan game endeavors. Bye now!